Welcome to Satsang Conversations, where we journey across the world to the serene and sacred spaces of BAPS Mandirs. This podcast is your gateway to exploring profound spiritual lessons that echo through time, yet remain incredibly relevant to our everyday lives. Each episode brings heartfelt discussions, wisdom, and insights that help us navigate the challenges of modern life with a deeper sense of peace, purpose, and connection. So whether you're seeking inspiration, solace, or a spark to light up your spiritual path, join us as we dive into conversations that uplift the soul and enrich the heart. This week, we travel to Neasden, UK, to the BAPS Mandir in London, where we'll be joining a conversation with Pujya Paramtattva Swami and Pujya Tyagratna Swami on the Vachanamrut.
Swami, thank you for joining us today, Paramtattva Swami and Pujya Tyagratna Swami. I think today's Vachanamrut that we're going to talk about is actually quite an interesting one. It's one of those Vachanamruts where when you first read it, you may not think it applies to you, right? But then I think as we go into it and discuss it, it becomes really relevant. And that's Pratham 20. It talks a lot about the atma, the jiva, and knowing oneself, and maybe focusing where you shouldn't be focusing. And it's a very interesting version. I don't know, Yogmurti, Bhai, if you wanted to read that out to start off with.
Yeah, sure, happy to read it. And I think, like you said, I'm definitely one of those people who read this. I read it a number of times. And until, to be honest, I was thinking about it for this discussion, I didn't realize how many layers there were. So really looking forward to getting your views, Sandeep, yours as well. So I guess let's get into it. We'll start reading. Sure. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I think we'll take parts at a time just so we can digest it and discuss it. So it begins, then Swami Sri Sahajanandji Maharaj said, "Please listen, I wish to ask all of you a question." Hearing this, all of the devotees said with folded hands, "Please do ask." Thereupon Sriji Maharaj asked, "Who is the most ignorant of all ignorant people?" Everyone pondered over the question, but no one was able to reply. So Sriji Maharaj said, "Here I shall answer myself." And before we go into his answer, one thing I wanted to just ask you was, clearly they couldn't answer his question. It was a very deep question. Why didn't he just preach? Why did he actually ask a question in the first place?
I think that's very interesting. And I think it's...
And before we say Swami, what's not is Maharaj himself, even though he's Bhagwan, and the people in front of him consider him to be Bhagwan, he asks,
yes,
I want to ask, can I wish to ask you a question? Will you allow me to ask a question?
Yeah.
Which I found was quite...
So even the framing of those words is so polite and humble. He's not there to preach or to look down upon them like, this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you need to do right. I think even from just that first line, there's so much to take away about parenting, about your relationship with, say, you're an employer or an employee, spouses, how you speak to each other. There's a lot to learn from here. And yeah, I think it's fascinating that he's not just come in with a set script. Okay, today I'm going to talk about this, right? He could easily have done that. Today's lecture is about this. He's not a professor. He's there. There is a relationship. As soon as he's made it into a dialogue, he's asking a question. He's seeing what the response may be, and it's actually fine.
Why is he doing that? Do you think there's another level to why he's seeing what the notice is, or do you think he's just more the politeness and?
No, I don't think it's not just a polite gesture. I think there's more to that. There is, because there are other Vachanamuts where the Paramahansas or even the Haribhaktas, they have attempted an answer. Sometimes they're right, like he will accept that answer, that's correct, and he'll expand upon that. Sometimes he will say, well, that's not really, I think that's not the full answer. And he'll give a much more comprehensive response to that question. The fact here that he's actually willing or receptive enough to receive responses from other people, I think that immediately makes, first of all, the audience more attentive. Like, okay, if someone's asking me a question, I have an opportunity to respond. And on this point also, the fact that they can't, saying I don't know is a legitimate answer. I think that can be just as intellectual to say, I don't know. That's a reasonable, intellectual, valid answer, rather than waffling or trying to make yourself look more intelligent in front of your mates, like, oh, I'm going to answer that question, right? If you don't know the answer, that's a sign of eagerness to learn. Like, actually, that's a wonderful question. I don't know the answer. I want to learn.
Do you think that, considering how many years the Paramahansas have been with Sriji Maharaj, they wouldn't know the answer? They could be that maybe they do know the answer, but they want to hear it from him. And so they'll raise their hands and say, look, we don't know the answer. And maybe they want Bhagwan to answer the question, to hear it from himself directly. That could be...
That could be, that's a very good
yeah, because you have Muktananda Swami, Nityananda Swami, Brahmananda Swami there.
Though this is early on in that kind of discourse journey.
So 76.
Yes.
And a good how many years before?
This is about 10 years before Maharaj passes away. Yeah.
And 15 years into Maharaj is coming to lodge.
Yeah.
So this is quite a few years.
Yeah, so I'm sure he's talked about this many ways, but I thought, again, that the way he frames the question then is very interesting as well. Can you just repeat the question?
Sure. So the question asked is, who is the most ignorant of all ignorant people?
Ah, yes.
Strong question.
Strong question.
Yeah. Ignorant of the ignorant.
Yeah. So that to me also, like, he could have asked plain, like, who's the most ignorant of all? That's what he's actually asking. But by framing it in a way that there is like this whole pool of ignorant people and of those who is the most ignorant, right? It kind of raises the stakes a bit, like, okay, this has just made it a bit more interesting. So even that, how you frame your questions, it's lots to learn from you, and how you ask the right question, you're going to get a much more precise answer.
So when he's referring to the pool of ignorant people, is that referring to, who do you think he's referring to there? Because is it just like, is it everyone? Or is it just certain people, do you think, Swami? I don't know, it's quite interesting. Now that you raised it, I didn't actually notice that before.
Yeah, so knowing now where the discussion is going and coming back to it, I see that he's asked the topic is knowledge, right? When you have somebody who is ignorant, someone who lacks knowledge. So the topic is knowledge now. So how much do you know? So Yogmurti, you're a chartered accountant, right? How much do you know in your field? Right, that's a question, right? And equally, I mean, you have to answer that question already. So that's a sensitive question, I guess. But even besides, so okay, you're a chartered accountant. You could be the best chartered accountant, but that doesn't mean you know how to build a bridge, right? That's a structural engineer. You haven't studied structural engineering. Right? You've studied, accounting. I could ask a structural engineer, who's built, the Eiffel Tower or, Tower Bridge, but he or she wouldn't know how to conduct, say, cardiovascular surgery. That's a surgeon. Each is a stream of knowledge. Now, if we take the expanse of all the streams of knowledge, it's physically impossible for one person to gain all that knowledge, even within their own field. That you could have a surgeon just focusing, not knowing the whole body even, just say the eye or the ear or the nose. Even within that, there is just an endless amount of knowledge. So, relatively speaking, we're all ignorant to a certain extent. Now this is what actually, this is what I feel is like the clincher. If what you know doesn't make you knowledgeable, by not knowing it, doesn't make you ignorant.
So repeat that.
I'll say that again. Okay. So you're a chartered accountant, or whoever you are, right, in your own field. If what you know doesn't make you fully knowledgeable, someone who might not know it doesn't make them ignorant.
Okay.
Right? So I don't know accountancy. I don't know. There's more things I don't know that I know. In fact, what I know is minuscule, right, for everybody. But that doesn't necessarily make me ignorant. What does make me ignorant is what Maharaj is talking about next. So, Bahya knowledge of the outside world, is necessarily going to be limited by my capacity. My intelligence is limited. whereas the pool of knowledge is vast and immense.
This is incredible because it opens it up to, it makes it accessible to anybody.
Correct. Yeah.
You don't need to have a certain level of intellect or exposure or experience based on what you just said.
Yeah, we're all equally ignorant, and yet we have access now to be knowledgeable. We don't, there is no prerequisite to this internal knowledge now.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever had those thoughts when I've read this myself, so it shows the value of discussing it, especially with Swamis as well. Should I read the answer? Yeah, go ahead. Shiji Maharaj then began, the jiva which resides within the body observes both the attractive and the unattractive. It witnesses childhood, youth and old age, as well as a countless number of other things. However, the observer fails to observe its own self. The jiva looks at objects externally, but it does not look at its own self. Therefore, it is the most ignorant of the ignorant. Maharaj continues then, furthermore, just as the jiva indulges in a countless variety of sights with the eyes, it similarly indulges in and knows the pleasures of the other vishays with the ears, skin, tongue and nose, but it does not indulge in the bliss of its own self, nor does it know its own nature. For this reason, it is the most ignorant of the ignorant. So I guess there's a lot to unpick in that. Maybe we can start with the jiva, because the question was who is the most ignorant, but here in the answer immediately we hear this term, the jiva. So I don't know, Sandeep, if you can explain, Swamis, if you want to explain what the jiva is.
Well, I think an interesting point, just go back to your ignorant, the most ignorant point. Again, to ask the question, is he, I know you're saying it's accessible to everyone, is Maharaj specifically here referring to people on the spiritual path? Or
to anyone. Based on the second paragraph, it opens up to everybody and anyone.
Because everyone has
a
some
soul.
level of ignorance.
Yeah, and everybody has a soul, has a jiva. Yeah, this is universal wisdom, right? This is what makes it so accessible and relevant to everybody beyond time, beyond geography, beyond ethnicity, even beyond faith. Everyone, every living being is accessible to this knowledge now.
That's a good point, because what Maharaj is saying there is that the jiva looks at, or people, let's just say, people, maybe not on the spiritual path, right? So people who have the jiva, maybe they're not aware of it, etc. But they say they look outside for their happiness. They don't look inside for their happiness.
It's very clear. It talks about happiness. Ultimately, that's what the eventual search is: peace, happiness, whatever you want to call it. And in a nutshell, he's saying we look outside for that happiness instead of within happiness. So in essence, he's saying that happiness is actually latent within us. It's innate.
And I guess just to reiterate, when we say us, I think when Maharaj is speaking here, he's kind of reminding us who we actually are. And I think something you just touched on in terms of the answer to the question, in terms of what the jiva is. You mentioned soul. Yeah. Is it worth just recapping on that just for so we're clear?
Yeah, so what we're looking at is something, the living spirit within, which is eternal, undying. It is the spiritual element which enlivens all of our souls. Like, you see a dead body and we see us, what's the difference? There is something missing there. That missing thing that brings something to life, which allows us to see, allows us to hear, allows us to feel. All those experiences are embedded because of that living spirit. That is the soul, the consciousness which that provides is what the soul is. And I think in all of this, Maharaj is urging us to look towards that. That is who we are. That is our true identity. And yet we're so fixated and caught up in our exterior kind of, modes. Yeah, and that we lose sight of who we really are. And that actually is the cause of unhappiness and despair.
So I guess I've always been confused. Is there a difference between the term jiva and atma? Or is the jiva the one that's bound to the Maya sense and atma is the pure?
So yeah, some people do make that distinction, that the jiva is the atma with Maya, surrounded by it, veiled by Maya, and Atma is the pure Maya, Atma.
Jiva with ignorance.
Sorry?
Jiva with ignorance.
Ignorance, yeah. But I think in the Vachanamrut, when we study the Vachanamrut, Maharaj does use it interchangeably. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's actually...
No, but I think what you mentioned regarding the identity of Atma and realizing the potential or the characteristics of Atma, it brings a lot into light. The Atma is very powerful. It is innately happy. It is indestructible. Obviously, Sri Krishna Bhagavan said in the Gita, even Maharaj has mentioned in the Vachanamrut. So all these qualities of the Atma, realizing that, if we are able to tap into that, you're happy. Because the Atma is innately happy.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll come to that a bit more further down as well, but when we're talking about the Atma, as you just mentioned as well, like what Maharaj is trying to say is that we're looking out, but instead, why don't we look in? And that's where we find the Atma.
So that's introspection?
Yes, in a way, yeah. Introspection, literally like looking within. Yeah.
So, okay, fine.
So, but looking within and identifying yourself as Atma.
Yeah.
When you introspect, this is what I'm reading into. When you introspect, you're actually looking within and identifying yourself as Atma rather than the physical.
Yeah. It's I remember there's a nice parable sometimes we share about talking about realizing the Atma. It's a nice way of understanding this distinction. So, like imagine a classroom, right? There's a teacher, and she's asking all this, the pupils, like, what color is an apple? Simple question, right? Young kids, 4, 5, 6, whatever. What color is an apple? And what would you expect? All the hands shot up, right? Somebody said red, right? Yeah. You had a red apple, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Another few hands were still up, right? Another color of an apple? Green. Green, correct, right. Most hands were down, right? I don't think there were many other colors up, but maybe yellow. Yeah, maybe yellow, okay. But there's one boy, he still had his hand up, right? So the teacher asked the boy, like, you want to go to the bathroom or something? He goes, no, I want to ask you a question. I want to answer your question. He goes, no, but we've had all our answers, right? Apples are either red or green or perhaps yellow, but, there's no other color. There's no blue or purple apples, right? He goes, no, I think there's another color of an apple. I said, yeah, okay, go on. What color are you talking about? And he said, apples are white. And everybody started laughing, right? And he said, no, apples aren't white. He goes, yeah, but look inside. Look inside. So you've had a red apple, right? Yeah. What color is it inside?
White.
Why do we call it red? Surely if it's a red apple, you think it'd be red inside, right? But no, it's white. You've had a green apple? Mm-hmm. Right, what color is it inside? White. Well, we call it green, and the red and the green is literally so superficial, right? It's skin deep.
It's just the outside.
It's skin deep. But all of us, when we go to our core, we're all white. The red apple is white, the green apple is white, the yellow apple is white. So all of us, if we actually penetrate beyond the skin, all of us are that soul. It's Atma. Can you imagine? It's that, whatever, was it melanin? Right? The skin, the pigment. The type and amount of pigment in our skin which gives us the colors, right? From black, brown, white, and everything in between. We are so fixated on that. Imagine if we could go beyond that. The amount of blood, sweat, and tears that have been shed because of the amount and type of melanin in your body. The wars, the violence, the hatred, because we can't go beyond what's here. We all bleed red. Even beyond that, if we all realize that we are the soul within, how powerful would that be? So, looking within.
Yeah, immense.
Yeah.
You don't judge anyone.
Yeah, there's no judgment.
There's no judgment here.
There is, and we're actually equal in that sense. It's a level playing field. We're all the soul. There's no ethnicity. There's no caste. There's no gender. There's no nationality. You're beyond all of that. You've immediately transcended, your DNA, that means your degrees, your pay packet, your postcode, what phone you, all of that is now immaterial. And immaterial actually is the right word, because we're going spiritual. We're going beyond the material into the spiritual.
So on one hand, we've got this knowledge, and I mean, when you describe it like that, it's like just perfection is a paradise, an existence like that where, we overcome all of these reasons to be unhappy, happiness is within us. But the thing is, we have to use what we have to perceive. So for example, in here, Maharaj says that we don't know our own nature, but we know through the senses, and all of our senses are pointed outwards. So we know what we feel, through touch, what we see, what we hear. And I guess for that reason, we are inherently focused on what's external. So how, it's difficult. I mean, even if we look at worldly examples, you mentioned earlier, Swami, in terms of the roles we play, various roles we play. So whether it be in a family or at work. Now at work, for example, we play a role, we have a job. And as introspective, you mentioned the word introspection before, as we think we might be, you can't really know yourself in a professional sense until you have an appraisal, until you ask for feedback, someone to tell you about yourself. So even in a worldly sense, we need that, someone to tell us things. So I guess my point now, and I know that in the discussion we'll get into a bit more, is that it's difficult to know your own nature because we are wired in a way to see things externally. So that's why I guess in the question, so following Maharaj's answer, the counter question that's asked by Shukmuni is that he raises a doubt and he says, is it truly in one's own hands to see one's own self? And if it is, why does the jiva remain ignorant?
Should we just answer the question actually?
Yeah, so Maharaj answers the question, right? Maharaj, he gives the answer.
Yeah.
It's satsang.
Yeah, he says, for a person who has attained satsang, realization of his jivatma does indeed lie in his own hands. In fact, when has he attempted to see his own self and failed to see it? Having become dependent to and made helpless by Maya, that jiva draws within and enters the dream and deep sleep states, but never does it draw within of its own accord to see its own self.
So there's a key line in there also, which one who has attained satsang. And how you define satsang is also very, it is through satsang that this knowledge is, you said the appraisal and the feedback and the guidance. That's where it comes from. It's through satsang that it comes through.
I'm just thinking of another Vachanamrut now. I want to read the exact words because it's just a few Vachanamruts before this. Pratham 16, Gadhada Section 1, number 16. And Maharaj talks about this, and here it is, look. When he accepts whatever words of advice God and the Sant offer as the highest truth, but does not doubt their words in any way. Thus, when the Sant tells him, you are distinct from the mind, body, indriyas and prans. You are Satya, and you are the knower of the body, indriyas and prans, which are all asatya. He accepts this to be the truth. He then behaves as the atma, distinct from all, but never follows the instincts of his own mind. So a key part of that spiritual journey, the process of understanding and going inside, is the Sant. When the Sant tells him and reveals his own self. So as you said, somebody else telling you or appraising you or helping you guide in that journey, it's the ekantik Satpurush, the Satpurush who is Akshar Brahm, guiding you to realize your own self.
I think this is something that we've always heard. Pramukh Swami Maharaj has always used to tell us in his katha, in his Ashirwad, even Mohan Swami Maharaj constantly, repeatedly reminding us that we are the Atma. And to look beyond just the physical body. Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often, how Atma Gnana actually helps us in day-to-day practice, in day-to-day life. And Swami would often joke about it, but Swami would say that, if somebody insulted you and, made fun of you in front of everybody and called your name or something, you're like a donkey. And that would be so insulting in front of everybody. But Pramukh Swami Maharaj was so dismissive of something like that as well. And he said, think about it. Are you really a donkey? You're the Atma. Forget about even the physical body. You're the Atma. The minute you start to realize that, all of a sudden it just shuts all the other doors, thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not the donkey. I'm not even this human, I'm not even this body. I'm beyond that. And automatically you've deflected all that insult.
That's really interesting, because what that example, putting it into context with the Vachanamrut, is really powerful, because what Maharaj is saying, if I'm getting this right, is if you try, you can succeed. If you try, because I think that I love that part about Vachanamrut. I love the part that when Maharaj says, "Who hasn't succeeded if they've tried?" To me, maybe a side topic here, but to me, that's Pramukh Swami. Hard work plus prayers equals success. Right? It's just we haven't tried hard enough. This is probably the hardest thing for any of us on the spiritual path to do, to look and see your jiva and shut out all the outside things. But I can translate that into everything else in my life. That if Maharaj is saying someone who really tries will be able to see the atma, then surely other material things, I mean, obviously career, etc. If I put my full effort into it, I can achieve those.
It applies there too.
Right? I mean, if this can be achieved, anything lower can be achieved as well. So that part I love about that Vachanamrut, and I take that away, and it inspires me, I think, quite a bit when I'm facing difficulties.
That's very good, you see. So what we're doing here already through this discussion, and we began from the way Maharaj frames the question and the fact that he asks the question, we're already using these teachings and these techniques for our spiritual journey, but also our kind of holistic journey as well. So there's so much to these Vachanamruts that we can actually take away. It's not just, it's just Atmanishta and very spiritual. Spirituality is practical.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, that's the point.
The point, actually, that was quite interesting. The point I was actually going to make, so I'm sorry to interrupt, was more the point you touched on, Tyagratna Swami, was what Bhagwan Swami said. If you get called a donkey, it's my choice.
To accept it or reject it. Yes.
And that choice, if I read actually this Vachanamrut, is based on the knowledge that I am the Atma. I remember there's a very interesting, there's a book called Shantaram. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's the first page was totally interesting, not to talk about it on the book, but in the first page he talks about how this person was effectively being tortured. And he said it was my choice whether to have hatred towards that person or to forgive him. And I think that concept of choice is, when I bring it back to this Vachanamrut, it's all about, like you said, the knowledge of the Atma. So then it becomes a Vachanamrut not about the jiva alone, but it becomes a Vachanamrut about introspection, knowledge of who you are, and then having that choice to be happy or to take it. Is that I'm wrong? Right?
Yeah.
So I think what really makes this a very powerful point now is that what Maharaj is, when he's seeing us as ignorant, he's saying, why is he moving towards this whole approach? We're ignorant, it's like helpless. We are attaching our sukh, our happiness, to everything external, which is subject to change, right? If I am going to be happy only when I wear this, this jacket, or I get this new phone, or I get this next new promotion, or I eat this, I watch this, I see this, I travel here. If those are my pins, if I pin my happiness on all those external objects and things, I am at the mercy of that.
You're so vulnerable.
Yeah. You immediately, you're insecure, because all those things are subject to change. Now, what he's trying to do is wrestle control from those external factors and bring it back inside. When we say independent, right? We're trying to be independent, right? Everybody, prides themselves on being autonomous or independent. I don't depend on. Independence, I see, is like dependent. I'm dependent on my inside. My happiness, this is what Maharaj is trying to explain, is not dependent on, how my coffee is made in the morning, or, what car I'm going to get in. It's inside. Because happiness is inside. And as Tyagratna Swami mentioned, we are inherently happy. The soul is Sat Chit Anand. It's like it's your very being. If you ask, it's like sugar. If you have sugar and it's trying to seek sweetness outside of itself, like you ask your sugar, you provide sweetness to everything else. So asking the soul to be happy because of X, Y, and Z outside, you are what's actually intrinsically happy. Sat, Chit, Anand. Sat means truth, literally, but it's existence. You are eternal existence, past, present, and future. Chit means consciousness. It's when we say alive, and so the experience of everything. And Anand, it's Anand Roop. So, isn't that powerful? Yeah. I get to decide, choose, because I am already happy. There's another Vachanamrut, Loya 17. Again, very, very powerful. Maharaj explains, nothing outside of yourself can make you happy. Nothing outside of yourself can make you unhappy. Because you are happiness. You're not happy or unhappy. You're happiness.
Yeah, it's tough though, right?
But Swami, as you were saying that though, it is tough, but I'll tell you what
powerful.
helps.
Yeah, no one says it's going to be easy, but it's powerful.
I think Yogmurti and I are probably having the same thought right now. But
and don't think it's easy for us as well, right? We're sadhus, right? But it's still an upward journey, and it's different levels, there's different stages, and we're all on that journey.
Yeah. I was just going to say, what helps me, you're right, it's so tough, and in the moment, sometimes it's hard to, when you're in the moment, you're in a difficult situation, but when you were talking about control, and then the fact that you are happy, it reminded me of one of my favorite prasangs from Pramukh Swami's biography, and take it back to 1973, so he had become the guru just a few years prior to that. So he was touring in the Mumbai region, and as we know, his schedule was prearranged from way before. And a devotee from Vadodara in Gujarat comes, so over 400 kilometers away. He comes to him and he says to Swami, Pramukh Swami, he says, it's my nephew's wedding, because you have to come. The English doesn't do justice to it. He says, which is an order. Yeah. He's just telling him, it's done, you've decided it. And just that one thing alone, people straight away were like, what? Like, hold on, you don't just walk up to your guru and tell him that he's going to come to your nephew's wedding without even having mentioned it or spoken about it. So so people said, look, his schedule has been prearranged, and he says, no, I've told my, the niece-to-be's parents and family, I've told the other side that you're going to come to the wedding. So people were like, did you not think, like, he's not your, something that you own, like an object of yours? And he says, but, I've told them now you have to, Pramukh Swami said, okay, what date is it? So he's just phenomenal. So he didn't get caught up in any of this. Like, we would all be so frustrated in that moment. Just the audacity, firstly, to do that, to promise someone's time. And then to just come in, order, give an order.
But Swami's engaging with him. He's not
he's trying to make it work.
So constructive. He's like, what date is it? So he says 24th of January, so he gives a date. Swami checks the itinerary. He's supposed to be in a place called Thana at that time. So he says, look.
So where's Thana?
In Mumbai.
It's in Mumbai. Now, his visit to Thana had already been delayed twice. So Swami explains, said, look, we're in Thana on that day, and it's already been pushed back twice. He says, but we're coming on Vasant Panchami. So Vasant Panchami, back then, I had to look into this. I was like, got really curious. And it was around 2 weeks later, just 2 weeks afterwards, he's going to literally come to where you are and, Pramukh Swami might make you happy, right? And he says, no, that won't do. So just double down, just douse fuel on the fire. Says, that won't do. He says, I've told them all. He goes, okay, tame jano, basically like your problem. I've made the promises. And Swami tried to explain. He said, look, he explained the point around, postpone the visit twice. And the man said, yeah, but, I've done this and I've done that. And now you're just going to leave me like this. And, my reputation is going to be in tatters. Obviously, anyone would have said, that is your problem. You should have thought of this before you promised. So in that moment, everyone around was just, very frustrated and irate at this person. He wouldn't listen. So in the end, Pramukh Swami, because he always used to say, means if someone doesn't understand, you have to recognize there are certain situations where the other people won't understand, so you've got to understand yourself. So at that time he said, okay, look, we'll come. So he says, so that, please that person in the moment. But then, again, phenomenal thing that happens here is, he tells Sadhguru Pujya Kothari Swami, who was helping, because Mumbai, that was his, he was the senior Swami in Mumbai. So he tells him, so please write a letter of apology to the devotees in Thana and saying, forgive us that we couldn't come this time, but we'll definitely come again. When we talk about control, to have that equilibrium where you have the presence of mind to issue an apology, even though it's not your fault. You don't complain, you don't say, oh, it's not our fault due to circumstances outside of you just apologize and you own it. So he showed in that moment how you can absolutely own and control the situation and keep the happiness. That is such an extreme example. You are the guru. And the reason I mentioned the point around it was only 2 years after, because when you are relatively new, that's when you're most insecure. But in this case, clearly he showed that he was absolutely not. He was so in control of himself, his happiness and his emotions. And to me, that's very instructive, inspirational, that example.
And that's, I think you've hit it on the nail. With Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Mahan Swami Maharaj, this is one thing that we will see. Very, very secure. Irrespective of what's happening around, whether it's insult, success, or failure, they remain equiposed. And I think that Atmagnan is a very strong part of that, which was very, very interesting, that Pramukh Swami Maharaj in 2004, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Gandhinagar, and they were celebrating 50 years of Bal Mandir. I think 20,000 Badaks had gathered in Gandhinagar, or 10,000, I can't remember. I was just watching and I was curious, what's Bapa going to tell the Badaks? Children, what's he going to talk to them about? He talked to them about Atmagnan.
Mm-hmm. Children.
It just shows how important it means. And for Swami, it doesn't matter how young you are, or maybe we underestimate how kids will receive something like this. But Swaminarayan, I think, was very clear that from the beginning you drill this in, and so that they grow up as confident individuals who are very secure, if they can identify with this concept that I am Atma.
Wasn't that something you were sharing earlier about?
Yeah, there was a very, very nice story someone shared with me, that this guy must have woken up. He woke up in the middle of the night because his daughter was crying. She must have been about 4 years old, and they tried to quieten her down, couldn't figure out what was wrong, and suddenly this little girl says that I don't want to die. She had probably learnt about death. Now, how do you console a 4-year-old kid about death? And
This is a true story, right?
yeah, it's a true story. Oh, sorry, so it's a true story. Yeah, and so then the dad goes in and he goes, look, let's just try this, because Pramukh Swami used to say this. Let's do this. And he talked to her and he goes, look, why are you crying? And she goes, I don't want to die. And he goes, yeah, but who are you? Remember what Pramukh Swami Maharaj taught us. Who are you? Are you, whatever her name was? Or are you Atma? And she's crying and she goes, Bapa says I'm Atma. And he goes, remember what Pramukh Swami said about the Atma? It's the body that dies, not the Atma. The Atma never dies.
He says this to his 4-year-old daughter.
He said this to his 4-year-old daughter, yeah? Wow. So why are you crying? And that calms her down immediately. And obviously, story ends there. She goes back to sleep and slowly things recover. But what's interesting was, 6 years later, she must have been about 10, right? And while he's carrying, she must have fallen asleep downstairs on the sofa. He's carrying her upstairs, and she wakes up and she says to her dad, Dad, I'm awake. So he puts her down, and on the steps, and he tells her, he goes, do you remember this step? And she goes, yeah. This is where you talk to me about Atma. Wow. I'm thinking that's very powerful, something that we'd underestimated, that a 4-year-old kid, and you talk to them about Atma, and she's managed to carry that with her for so many years. How powerful that must have been.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's actually incredible.
So I think it also shows that, first of all, obviously, never underestimate children.
And this knowledge, this wisdom is applicable to everyone.
Yeah.
So we were talking about happiness and how we are inherently happy. And we see that in the lives of our gurus as well. I think it's also helpful to take those examples and maybe help us reflect on our day-to-day lives.
Because it's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. So I don't know what the joke maybe used to be.
Go on.
So,
humorous.
Mine have been divorced actually. So, if once we come home maybe and the missus has cooked a bit of food, I sit down to eat it. if I have the first morsel, if it isn't quite, on par, which she normally has, which is very good normally, if it isn't quite on par, I say, Pramukh Swami Smriti Agya. Okay.
That's how you say it.
I just say, well, I've started to say, I was like, Miss, and she's like, huh? It's like, I did Pramukh Swami Smriti Agya. And she goes, what? Was it too much salt? Too little salt?
But generally, I think it's a very good point that all of us, you're relating what we've learned from the Vachanamrut, you're relating it, say, to Jivan Charitra. You read Swami's prasangs, and because Pramukh Swami Maharaj's life, the Guru's life, Mahant Swami Maharaj's life are like the living examples of the Vachanamrut. It's the Vachanamrut in practice, in action. And then to make that applicable to ourselves. It's all well and good in a book, and we can talk about it and give lectures and write book, do podcasts on it. But until we actually try to implement it and apply it in day-to-day scenarios, situations, that's when you see the real worth. And it actually goes back to the very beginning when you said that, we've probably read about this Vachanamrut, read it several times, but there are so many layers and we keep excavating more deeper meanings from it. And that applies to all of us. You could be a sadhu for 30, 40, 50 years. Every time you come to this, any Vachanamrut, that's the power of Bhagwan Nivani. Yeah. This is God talking to us, that depending on our own sadhana, my own journey, it will speak to me wherever I am. What do I need here and now to take the next step? So when I start applying it, we'll have a different meaning. When I've, gotten to the next level, there's still something more for me to improve upon. I can go to the same Vachanamrut and it'll speak to me in a different way. Like, yeah, you got this far, but yeah, this is next. And that's why it's so fresh. When you say universal, it applies to people of all ages, at all levels. You could be an absolute novice on the spiritual path and still find something amazing to apply to your life. And you could be a sadhu for 50 years and still find something that you need to work on.
Which is why, when Bhagwan Swaminarayan, asked the Paramahansis, tell me about what you can do. And they all listed all these things, that, if you tell us to stay without food for so many years, we'll stay without food. If you tell us to just extreme cold, we'll tolerate all that. We'll do all these things. You tell us what we'll do. You tell us what you want us to do. And the one line he stops at, he goes, all I need you to do is, Mano Chaitanya Rupa Tamaru. Just believe yourself to be atma, separate from the body. That's a starting point.
Yeah, that's actually, it's so fundamental.
That is a starting point.
Your spiritual journey begins from there.
Okay. Because I was going to say surely that's one of the hardest things to do. So, but is it a journey, do you say, is it a journey, it's where we need to be, so it's just, you have to start. You just have to start.
Taking that first step.
And also this whole, when we say journey, this whole concept of actually believing it and practicing that belief. Nago Atma Chuj, I am the Atma. It's not a journey of X number of years before we actually come to that realization. It's how strong that Shraddha, that faith is in that belief. And obviously with guidance from the Satpurush.
Again, I think that's the point you were trying to make, right? That Swami, there's so many examples in Pramukh Swami Maharaj's life, Pujya Swami Maharaj's life on the Satpurushes previously, of where they've shown us in situations, real life situations, of either they've been insulted or, like I said, praised, or maybe they've had things not go their way, that maybe you and I would react quite negatively to, but they've kind of shown us, or they have shown us how to behave.
And you know how you mentioned that Maharaj says, when have you tried and you didn't get to see it? And was it Swarupananda Swami? Sachidananda Swami? Shukmuni Swami. And he says, is it in our hands? And Maharaj actually answers that question in Vartal 19. When he says, Satpurush ne vishe dhrad priti. Vartal 11. Satpurush ne vishe dhrad priti, ej atma darshan nu sadhan che. The correlation here.
And literally I was thinking the same thing because I heard an extract yesterday, and it's amazing because when he gives the answer in this Vachanamrut, he is there, but the way he does it is so empowering, because look at his answer. For a person who has attained satsang, realization of his jivatma, does indeed lie in his own hands. So if you cross-reference that to Varta 11, when he says satsang, he means Satpurush. Because, but in this Vachanamrut, he talks about it lies in your own hands. So in this Vachanamrut, he's trying to make sure that we're fully empowered and we're ready to do everything we can for ourselves first, not just rely on someone else. It's just, it just blew my mind,
Having the Satpurush is a baseline. Now, the efforts are in our hands.
Exactly, yeah. But it's so, that, when you said earlier, he's not a professor, but that is so masterful. It just occurred to me now when I was reading it earlier, I thought that is phenomenal because in the Vachanamrut, he does clearly state that the Satpurush is essential, but he's not going to let us off the hook in terms of, look, you have to put the effort in.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
And I think there's a concept of, right, well, if you put the effort in, this is the other question. If you put the effort, if it's in our hands, ultimately that final step is due to Maharaj and Swami's grace of seeing the jivatma. Because if it's in our hands, then maybe our ego probably gets inflated. We think we're in control of everything.
Yeah.
And that can have a downward spiral as well, right? So maybe if Maharaj says it's in your hands, so does that mean my successes and failures are solely down to me? Both the up and the down? How do I marry the two, right? If I do try and say I fail, it's in my hands. I have the control.
So are we talking about Atmagnan or just personal endeavors?
I suppose our endeavors towards realizing.
Yeah, I think no effort will go unrewarded as far as this is concerned. It's like you climb a wall. If you're climbing, if you put a ladder up the wrong wall, no matter where you climb, you're not going to get it. Let's just say having the Satpurush means you've got the right wall. So now whatever you climb, you're climbing up the right wall. So every effort is never going to go unrewarded.
Krishna Bhagavan says this in the Gita as well. Nahi kalyan krut kaschit durgatim tato gacchati. So whatever you do along the path of spirituality is not wasted. It helps you some way move towards your goal.
And so even in daily life, if this whole aspect of Atma realization and you have confidence, you become fearless, fulfillment, all these things, then logic success and failure won't matter too much to you personally. You'll be able to manage. It's how you manage your successes and failures in life because you have Atmagnan.
This is such a liberating thought. You are in control now. As you said before, like your mood is not dependent on anything else outside of you, which you don't have control over, right? What you have control over is yourself, your own Atma. And now everything rests there. It's such a liberating thought. You don't have to compare yourself, oh, she's taller, or he's got more muscles, or he's got a bigger house, or she's got a nicer phone. That comparison is gone now. Everything, it's liberating and it's empowering.
Yes, and I fully agree. I was just interesting, but it requires a lot of self-awareness, right? Which is tough because you referenced the Gita there, which is quite interesting because it always strikes me when before the Gita is imparted to Arjun. Arjun is the only warrior out of the hundreds or thousands who assesses the situation in front of him. He goes out in the middle of the battlefield and sees his family on one side and the family on the other side, and he realizes what's going to happen here and what he needs to do. So he had a tremendous level of self-awareness first.
But that self-awareness was very superficial. It's the skin. It's red and green still. He's not seeing the white inside, you see. That's the point. That's why he's upset. If you see the whole trajectory of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, so the very first, when Arjun actually lays out his situation, it's like he's having a panic attack, right? His mouth is dry, his head is spinning, his hairs are on end, he's burning. Classic symptoms of stress, of a panic attack.
And that's driven by his self-awareness, which is a good thing. His self-awareness is a good thing.
Which is driven by, so that's what Krishna Bhagavan is trying to address, right? So the very first slok of the Gita, first of all, it's very interesting because before Bhagwan starts speaking, there's a phrase where Arjun is described. Tushnim babhuva. Arjun fell silent. It's only when humans stop talking that God are they receptive to God's talking. It's our ego, our own inner noise that's actually drowning out God's voice as well. So when Arjun has laid out himself, like this is, I'm despondent now, in despair. He falls silent, and then Krishna Bhagavan actually starts speaking. And the very first thing he says, and it actually helps understand it, because we're talking about Sukh, and what Krishna Bhagavan is explaining now. He goes, Asochan anvasochastvam. Like, you are mourning something which is not worthy of grief. And then it all, he talks about agatonscha, like things which have gone and coming, right? Nano shochanti panditaha. The wise don't lament all of this because this is immaterial, this is dying, it's transient. So that point about nano shochanti, don't lament. That's the very beginning of his Upadesh. And the very last words that he uses, ma shucha, it's the same word, lament, don't lament. There as well he talks about, this is 18th of the year 66, the first.
The first and the last.
So the first word where he actually begins his Upadesh, chapter 2, I think it's verse 10 or 11. Nanu shochanti panditaha. And then the very last slok that in the Gita where he's talking, 1866, chapter 18, number 66. Sarvan dharman parityajya mam ekam shranam braja aham tva sarvapapebhyo mokshishami ma shucha. Ma shucha, don't lament. So from the beginning to the end, his entire Upadesh, the teachings of the Gita about rising above lament. Rising above, and how does he show that? The very first Upadesh is, your lament is rooted in this ignorance that this is going to die, this is my relative, this is what's going to make me happy. No, that is not worth grieving about. When he teaches him about the atma is unborn, it's undying, it doesn't get burnt in fire, it doesn't get wet in water, it doesn't dry in the wind, all of these things. That's the beginning of the Gita. That's the very first step of spirituality. That you can do everything, but unless you actually do this, you are not going to rise above your lament.
It's such a bird's eye view.
Yeah, it's just like, this is where he's teaching you, and that's the powering thing. That's what's so empowering. It's liberating. It's literally, mokshishami. I'm going to liberate you.
It's quite interesting because then you in one way you think that the niyams that we follow, some of the tougher niyams we follow, Yogmurti, Bhai and myself.
All of us.
All of us. But it's like we feel sometimes they are burdens upon us or restrictions upon us. I cannot do this, or also ultimately everyone has a choice, but the niyams saying, they're restrictive niyams, and they are niyams that bring out the bhakti, so like etc.
The affirmative, yeah.
Exactly. Sorry, what was the word you used?
Affirmative.
Affirmative niyams, yeah. There's affirmative niyams, and then there's restrictive niyams. The restrictive niyams are the ones that hurt a bit more, right? You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't see this, you shouldn't go there, etc., etc. But I think as I've grown older, I think hopefully you agree, I find those niyams actually liberating. They free me, because I'm not bound by addictions or a need or a necessity to have this certain thing happen or be at this certain thing or taste or try this certain item for me to be happy.
And I think from Vachanamruts like this, if we can actually understand, do it with understanding as well, that what I'm striving after, is it that high from that, that swig or that, experience? Why am I attaching my happiness to something else? When you say liberating, you're literally breaking that bond and finding, I can be happy here and now without eating that or seeing that or wearing that or having that or being that. I can be happy here, now, everywhere, all the time.
You mentioned something about a reflection and having the Satpurush as a reflection. Now, talking about somebody who has Atmagnan, Pramukh Swami Maharaj's entire life, despite all the difficulties or anything that these hardships that he's faced, things that we face on a day-to-day, just make it 100-fold for Bapa. And yet to have remained so equiposed, yet happy, never complaining, never blamed anybody for his problems or anything like that, things that may have come his way. I think that shows so much confidence and responsibility of your own happiness. That he, in the Jivan Chaitra, there's one prasang in the start where it says that Swami was never one to go around begging for sympathy and empathy from people. He would never go around begging for sympathy or compassion, looking for a shoulder to cry on. He just got on with it. And I think that's such a powerful side of Bapa's Atmanishta or Atmagnan, because he was just so happy within and took responsibility. Look, just move on. So I think reflecting of the Satpurush as his life is it shows how practical imbibing Atmagnan is in our lives also. Otherwise he wouldn't have done it.
Taking that onto a slightly different level, I think that's a very important point that Tyagratna Swami, you point about. The word I liked was responsibility, right? Now I am responsible for my happiness. I am responsible for, at this moment, if I'm happy or not, the responsibility lies with me. And that's what we call maturity, right? So when there's a child, and you've got, two young boys, you've got a daughter and a son. Children, if you like, who broke this? Oh, it wasn't me, it was Ben, right? They're quite easy to defend themselves by blaming somebody else. When you take responsibility, that's sometimes scary. So when you say, because Mara talks about pota samejo, look at yourself. Don't blame, if I'm not happy, don't blame anybody or anything else. Now it's my responsibility. And that's, while it may seem scary at first, that moment, the moment you accept that I am responsible, you're in control. You've wrestled control from everything else, and that is such a mature way of looking at things. That's the first step towards a solution. Because now I've realized that, okay, I am unhappy because of X, Y, and Z. I need to move from here to here. That's in my hands. I can do that. I don't have to rely on anybody else. It's within me, literally within me, to do that. And so these teachings are really powerful. They're empowering ourselves on finding happiness, being happy in any situation.
It's so helpful to have tangible examples as well, because I suppose if you hear the theory, it all sounds plausible and it all sounds sensible, but sometimes situationally, how do you apply it in that situation? And I think, Swami, as you mentioned, that's where, when we look at the life of our gurus, I've heard the phrase once where the Satpurush is like a mirror. And I guess over time, how I've come to understand that is, in the same way as you need a mirror to see yourself physically, when you look at the Satpurush's life,
Maharaj uses that exact word actually in the Vachanamrut, Pratham 48, Gadhada Section 148, Satsang Darpan Tulya cha.
Darpan Tulya, yeah. And because, we talk about, even in the Vachanamrut, Maharaj talks about, okay, who has tried to see the soul and not seen it? But still, when you read that, you think, but how? What am I looking for? I don't know what it looks like. But when you look at the Satpurush situationally, and you see how he operates, that's the atma.
That's your atma.
That's what I'm going for. I had another example, a similar theme to the one you mentioned earlier about the whole donkey example. And this is the beautiful thing about the Satpurush's life, complete consonance of what he said and what he did. Yeah. Everything was aligned. In 1983, I believe, he was touring in the Ahmedabad region, and it was just during the Shravan month, holy month of Shravan. And some devotees came to him and they said, Swami, in our village or in our local area, there's some other people who are basically publicly on the mic preaching hate towards you and to the Sanstha. They're speaking bad about you. And Swami said, okay. And they said, no, but they're doing it every day and they're doing it in public on the mic.
Is this like social media?
This is the exact thing I was thinking about. And I tell you, it would be so relevant. And so, so Bapa says, oh, okay, so what, every day? And it's almost like he's taking interest, but they don't realize what he's doing. And so, yes, Swami, every day. And he's like, okay, so how about you daily, every day, go to the mandir, get the mic there and speak about good things, about Bhagwan, do katha and things like that. He goes, take the positive. He goes, if they're that enthusiastic about going out there daily and saying what they say, how about we be enthusiastic about doing what we're supposed to do? He flipped that thing completely over. He didn't ask who it was. He didn't ask what they were saying. He didn't find any need to tell anyone to say, go back and answer them back. He was completely disinterested in that. Again, keeping control of his happiness, but then instructing others like how to control their, because they would have been frustrated.
Yeah.
So what can they do? I just found that, again, absolutely phenomenal. And can you imagine if people on social media could imbibe that? The whole thing would just go quiet.
It just probably wouldn't exist.
So.
But that point about taking responsibility and not blaming others, that's a very mature approach. It just reminded me recently, it's almost like a joke actually. I was listening to Mansai Maharaj's Katha one morning, and he shared this prasang, this kind of parable almost like a guy who's complaining to the doctor that, my wife's, really hard of hearing. Her hearing has really, gone down. Like, what can I do for her? So the doctor goes, okay, how bad is it? Can she not hear if she from very far away or very close? Because, why don't you try? So he goes, okay. So he went back home and from say 40 feet away, started shouting, hey, what's for dinner tonight? Right? So no response. So he goes a bit closer, 20 feet, and he goes, what's for dinner tonight? No response, right? So he goes really close, about 5 feet. What's for dinner tonight? Still no response, literally goes up to her in her face and shouts in her ear, what's for dinner tonight? And his wife goes, this is the 4th time I'm telling you, there's roti shack today, right? So you get it, right? Who was the person hard of hearing? It wasn't the wife, it was him. But he thought it was her because he couldn't hear. Look within. That means don't look at finding fault in others or ascribing responsibility to other people, seizing control, looking at yourself. This is when you say pota samejo, look within, at a more kind of exterior point of it. But even at that level, if we could look to ourselves in situations and see, where can I improve? Where can I be the person to accept responsibility? And that makes me, again, in control. That's the moment I begin to improve.
You know how Maharaj says, don't look externally and look internally. What happens is, and we all fall victim of this, we have expectations of everybody around us, which we cannot control. And that's what brings a lot of misery and unhappiness, because we expect people to do things, whether it's family, work, whatever, and it's never to the level that we want it to be, and so that makes us miserable or upset or whatever. The only thing that we can control is within, is our own. We have that control to control our own happiness or the way we perceive things or the way we receive it. And I think that's very interesting how Maharaj says that, because we're always expecting other people to do things externally, except the only thing we can control is how we receive it. And so I think that's, when you talk about control and responsibility, that's something that resonates very well with this Vachanamrut.
I can't change other people.
You can't.
Just
and expecting them to change.
Yeah, it's just, you're setting yourself up for misery. Again, now this reminds me of another...
It reminds me of a prasang of Pramukh Swami, actually.
Go on.
He was in Saharanpur. I remember this because it was the one line the Swami drops at the end is so appropriate. So there must have been someone in Saharanpur who was very anxious about leaving the next day. So at the start of the morning, obviously everyone goes to Aarti, and he found Pramukh Swami, and he goes, and I might be paraphrasing the prasang here, so please forgive me. He goes, Swami, I need a car. Yeah. Will it be ready? So Swami said, yes, we'll be ready. And about 2 hours later, again, found Swami goes, Swami, my car will be ready, won't it? And Pramukh Swami goes, yes, it will be ready. This is the ready to be made. He explains to him in full detail. And again, third time, fourth, I can't remember how many times. But the point is, at the end, someone asked Swami, did you not get frustrated? We told him the first time, the second time, why would the answer change the fifth time?
It's bro, relax, man.
just let me go, just let it be. And Swami just said, but that's his swabhav. He's going to keep asking, and it's our job to accept it. Which was a phenomenal prasang when you realize that, there's obviously things happens very close to home or in the work environment, etc. And you're right, whether you get agitated or not is up to you.
Yeah. So, as you said, so how futile is it trying to change everything else outside except yourself, right? There's a nice parable that Pramukh Swami used to say in a different way, which I kind of reframe in a modern context, but it's basically about a father. Like he's had a terrible day at work, like everything you can imagine that could go wrong. His boss shouted at him, his computer's hanged, lost all his documents, he spilled coffee on his shirt, etc., whatever, right? Everything's gone wrong. And all he can think about is, because I want to get home and relax in my favorite chair and just read the newspaper. I just want to switch off. So he's coming home.
You said it was modern, Swami.
Huh?
You said it was modern. It's newspaper nowadays.
Oh, sorry. Okay. My iPad.
Yeah.
My tablet. Yeah. Shows I'm revealing my age now. So he comes home and he's got his young son greeting him lovingly when he comes through the door, and his son goes like, Papa, Daddy, let's play. And this man has had a horrendous day at work. All he wants is to sit alone and detox, just unwind. So he goes to go and play outside. Yeah, but it's raining, Swami. Okay, go and play on your Xbox, or go and do something, read a book. And the boy wouldn't have it. He goes, no, I want you to play with you. And this guy wanted time alone. So
sounds familiar.
So he's trying to sit in his chair and read his iPad, read his newspaper. But what happens? He goes, look, this boy's not going to give me any peace. So what does he do? In his newspaper, there was some supplement or something. There was a page which had a map of the world. So he tore that page out and ripped it into small pieces and gave it to his son. He goes, Liberating, right? This is a jigsaw puzzle for you. Go away and put the whole map back together again. And don't come back until it's all in one place. He thought he bought himself at least an hour or so to read his newspaper in peace and quiet. But lo and behold, in 10 minutes, his son is back. Didn't I tell you not to come back to me? He goes, yeah, but look, it's done. It's now, no way. How can you put, there's so many small pieces, how could you put the whole map? Who knows where, Vietnam is or Indonesia is, But he saw that the whole map was back intact. He was so impressed. He was wow, beta, you're really smart. You put the whole world back together. He's praising his son, but his son goes, but Dad, it actually was very simple. You see, on the other side of the map, there was a picture of a young boy. All I had to do was put that one boy together, and the whole world fell into place. So Pramukh Swami used to say something similar to this, and he used to explain, here we all are, trying to fix the world, and solve all its problems and put it all back into place. But actually, all we can do and what we need to do is focus on ourselves. One person needs to change. And that person isn't the Prime Minister or the President or the Chancellor of the Exchequer or my school teacher. That one person is me. So if every father is a better father, every mother is a better mother, every child is a better child, every employer or employee is a better employer or employee, the whole world becomes a better place. So not expecting others to change, not looking outside for the solution, looking within. I have to be a part of the solution, and I can help the world become a better place.
Swami Maharaj gave a really nice example to do with expectations, and he said, regardless of what you have externally, external objects, he gives like maths, there's a sum. Whatever number's at the top of a division, if the number below is 0, then the answer is infinite. So regardless of what you think you have externally, if your expectations are 0, your happiness is infinite. So two people can have infinite happiness regardless of their external circumstances if their expectations are nil.
And conversely, you can have the same amount of objects. One can be absolutely miserable because expectations are so high, and one can be absolutely happy because the expectations are so low.
Higher the expectations, the less the happiness.
Yes.
So it's quite interesting you mentioned, you say happiness is in our hands and we're in control and we have that responsibility. But I think, just thinking the devil's advocate, there'll be some people who say, well, actually my circumstances are such where they're quite, quite severe, quite drastic. Things like, extreme poverty or perhaps certain issues at home people might be experiencing, or, things or ailments that occur within the body, which may not be fully in our control. So how do we close that loop in saying that when Maharaj is saying we are in control, when there be maybe a number of external factors that we may not be in control of, or we can't stop. And that reaction to that is difficult just to hide away from. Do you see? Is there a...
No, so I think
Well, I misunderstood.
you've kind of answered it yourself, actually. So there are circumstances outside, and then our response to it. So extreme poverty or abuse or physical aid. These are all things actually which, when you see the Satpurushas, Jivan Charitras, or the Paramahansas who have been through, they've been through extreme poverty, hardship, physical ailment, health issues, disapproval, like public disapproval, all those issues, and how they've reacted to that is what the key is. That doesn't mean that obviously, say you're in an abusive relationship, so for example, that you don't, you keep, sucking it in, right? Being proactive, seeking help, seeking medical advice, whether it's, say, mental health issues, you can actually seek, a mental therapist or whatever, mental health therapist.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it's your choice. You're still in control of how you react to finding a solution.
Decision that you make.
Yeah. So you're still being proactive in that sense as well, not, again, just shirking responsibility for anybody else, like, oh, this is it now, and I'm going to have to, tolerate. Even tolerating can be a constructive process if I take that control in myself. Seeking help and being proactive.
That's actually really interesting. That's really interesting. So then it is applicable to a huge
Spectrum of people, yeah.
This is the universality of our spiritual wisdom. It cuts through all borders of race or geography, of nationality, ethnicity, social rank. It is applicable to me here and now, everywhere and anywhere.
because jiva is in everyone.
Yeah. So there's always some certain thing, so new things to learn from seeing Vachanamrut. So never feel like, I've read it once. It's not a novel. You can keep going back to it and keep growing and keep engaging with it.
There's so many layers, right? Like you were saying.
Yeah, honestly, I must have read this Vachanamrut so many times, and I know it for Maharaj's description of the ignorant person, but until we decided to discuss this and thought about it more deeply and listening to all of yourselves, honestly, I could have never come to those thoughts just on my own. So I think it just shows the power of discussing this and actually thinking more deeply and not just taking it on face value, because I've never derived all of this from all of those times I read it before.
And the next time we read this, something else will come up, guaranteed. Because it's whatever stage of life we're in or what we're going through, it'll relate at that time.
So look, I think that's a really good place to wrap up today. I think it's been a fantastic discussion. I would have never come to so many of those points by myself. So just thank you.
I think that applies to us as well. Like, we're learning from you as well, right? I think that's not just that we're a sadhu, so we know everything. It's these type of discussions that you can have with other people that always bring new insights, new perspectives. So thank you as well.
Thank you, Pujya Paramtattva Swami, Pujya Tyagratna Swami, Sandeep Bhai. Thank you as well.
Thank you.